The next time something inside you hurts, you'll do something almost no human in history could do. You'll walk to a cabinet, shake 2 small white pills into your palm, swallow them with a sip of water, and in about 20 minutes the pain will fade. You won't think about it. You won't even really notice it working. But that little white pill is one of the youngest things in your entire life. For more than 300,000 years, not a single one of your ancestors had access to anything like it. When their heads pounded, when their teeth rotted, when a broken bone ground against itself, there was no cabinet, there was no pill, there was just the pain and a body that had to find another way. So what did they actually do? How does a creature with no medicine survive a world that hurts it constantly? The answer is stranger and more beautiful than you'd expect, and it's hiding inside your own body right now. Let's start with the most important question of all. Why do we even feel pain? It seems cruel, like a design flaw. But pain is the opposite of a flaw. Pain is one of the most sophisticated survival systems ever evolved. There are rare people alive today born with a condition called congenital insensitivity to pain. They feel nothing, and they tend to die young. They bite through their own tongues as children. They walk on broken legs until the bone is destroyed. They burn their hands on stoves and never pull away. Pain, it turns out, is not your enemy. It's the alarm that kept your ancestors alive long enough to become your ancestors. Every time early humans felt it, the lesson was burned in. Don't touch that. Don't step there. Protect this. Pain was the first teacher our species ever had. But here's the thing, evolution figured out a long time ago. An alarm that never shuts off will get you killed too. If you're being chased by a predator and your injured leg screams at you to stop, you stop and you die. So the body built its own emergency override. And in 1975, 2 scientists named John Hughes and Hans Kosterlitz finally found it. They discovered that the brain produces its own painkillers, chemicals that bind to the exact same receptors as opium. They called them endorphins, a word that literally means endogenous morphine. Morphine from within. You are carrying a pharmacy in your skull, and it has been there the entire time. This is the system that creates the so-called runner's high. It's why soldiers report feeling no pain from massive wounds until hours after a battle. It's why a mother can keep moving through agony to protect a child. Your ancestors couldn't name this chemical, but they lived on it. When a hunter was gored and still had to walk 20 miles home, endorphins carried him. The first painkiller in human history wasn't found in a plant or a cave. It was built into the body, waiting for hundreds of thousands of years before anyone gave it a name. But the body's own pharmacy has limits, and this is where our ancestors did something that still astonishes researchers today. They looked at the world around them, the plants, the trees, the fungus on a fallen log, and somehow, with no chemistry and no microscopes, they figured out which ones could dull pain. Take the willow tree. Thousands of years ago, in completely separate parts of the world, with no contact between them, humans independently discovered that chewing willow bark eased aching joints and brought down fevers. The ancient Egyptians wrote it down in the Ebers Papyrus around 1500 BCE. The Sumerians knew it. The Greek physician Hippocrates recommended it. For millennia, nobody understood why it worked. They just knew that it did. Then, in 1828, a chemist isolated the active compound from that bark and named it salicin. And in 1897, a chemist at the German company Bayer refined it into something gentler on the stomach. They called the final product aspirin. That little white pill in your cabinet, the most common medicine on earth, is just a purified version of something your ancestors were chewing off a tree before history was even written. And willow was only the beginning. In the mountains of South America, people chewed coca leaves to numb pain and exhaustion. Across the ancient Near East, humans cultivated a flower the Sumerians literally called hulgil, the joy plant. We know it today as the opium poppy. By around 3400 BCE, they were growing fields of it. Half the painkillers in a modern hospital are descended from that single flower. Think about what that means. The most powerful pain drugs we have, the ones we lock in cabinets and regulate by law, were discovered by people with stone tools, thousands of years before anyone knew what a molecule was. But the most incredible evidence doesn't come from a text or a tablet. It comes from a body. In 1991, 2 hikers in the Alps found a corpse frozen in the ice. They assumed it was a lost climber. It wasn't. It was a man who had died roughly 5,300 years ago, preserved so perfectly that scientists could examine his stomach, his clothing, and even his last meal. They named him Otzi, and Otzi was in pain. His joints were worn, his stomach was infected with a parasite, and what he was carrying changed everything. Among his belongings, researchers found pieces of a specific fungus, birch polypore, threaded onto a leather strap. This fungus contains compounds that are antibacterial and that can fight intestinal parasites, exactly the kind of parasite living in his gut. This wasn't random. A man 5,300 years ago was carrying targeted medicine for a condition he had. But it gets stranger. Otzi's body is covered in more than 60 tattoos, and they aren't decorative. They're small lines and crosses, and almost all of them sit directly over his joints, his lower back, his knees, his ankles, the exact places where his skeleton shows the worst wear. Many of them line up with the points used in modern acupuncture, a practice that supposedly didn't exist in Europe for thousands more years. Researchers now believe these tattoos were a form of pain treatment, ash rubbed into cuts, made precisely where he hurt the most. A frozen man carried a medicine kit and a map of his own pain on his skin, and he did it before the pyramids were built. Now plants and fungus could dull pain. But what did our ancestors do when the pain was deeper, when it was inside the skull itself? The answer is one of the most disturbing facts in all of anthropology. They drilled into the head. It's called trepanation, and it is the oldest known surgical procedure in human history. Archaeologists have found human skulls more than 7,000 years old, with neat, deliberate holes cut into them, made with stone tools. For a long time, nobody could believe these people survived it. Surely this was something done to a corpse or a death sentence. But then researchers looked closely at the edges of the holes, and the bone had healed. The smooth, rounded regrowth around the openings means only one thing. These people lived. They had a hole opened in their skull, with no anesthesia as we know it, no sterile tools, no understanding of germs, and they walked away and recovered. Studies of these ancient skulls suggest a survival rate far higher than anyone expected, sometimes well over half. We still don't fully know why they did it, to relieve pressure, to treat headaches, seizures, or something spiritual. But the unavoidable truth is this. When the pain was bad enough, our ancestors were willing to open the human head to try to stop it, and astonishingly, it often worked. So that's plants, fungus, and surgery. But there was one more painkiller, and it was the most powerful of all. It wasn't a chemical or a tool, it was each other. In the 1950s, an archaeologist named Ralph Solecki was excavating a cave in Iraq called Shanidar. There he found the remains of several Neanderthals, and one of them, known as Shanidar I, told a story that rewrote what we thought we knew about ancient humans. This individual was a wreck of old injuries. He had a crushing wound to the side of his face that likely left him blind in one eye. One of his arms was withered and probably useless, possibly amputated. He had damage to his legs that would have made him limp badly. And here is the part that matters. All of these terrible injuries showed signs of long-term healing. This man lived for years after being broken. A blind, one-armed, limping individual in a brutal Ice Age world could not have survived alone for a single season, which means someone fed him, someone protected him, someone carried him when the group moved. This is the discovery that anthropologists keep returning to because it appears again and again in the fossil record. Healed fractures, toothless skulls of people who lived long after they could chew, meaning others softened their food. Across the deep past, we find broken bodies that recovered, and every one of them is proof of the same invisible medicine. When your ancestors were in pain, they were not abandoned to it. They were held. The group absorbed the cost of the weak. And modern science now knows that this wasn't just kindness. Social connection physically reduces pain. Being cared for, being touched, being safe, all of it triggers the body to release more of those internal painkillers. The presence of other people was, quite literally, an analgesic. For most of human history, the strongest pain relief on Earth was simply not being alone. And here is what we lost. Today, when you hurt, the instinct is to fix it quietly and quickly. You take the pill and you carry on. You don't tell anyone. Pain has become a private failure, something to suppress and hide so you can keep functioning. We've gotten extraordinarily good at silencing the alarm, but our ancestors lived inside a different truth. For them, pain was not just a signal to be muted, it was a shared event. It pulled the group inward. It was met with plants gathered by familiar hands, with care, with the warmth of people who refused to let you suffer where they couldn't reach you. We have aspirin now. We have surgery so advanced that the man with the hole in his skull would weep at it. We have drugs descended from that ancient joy plant, refined to a precision no Sumerian could dream of. And these things are gifts. They have ended suffering on a scale our ancestors could never have imagined. But somewhere along the way, as the pain got easier to silence, we also let go of the oldest medicine we ever had, the understanding that pain was never meant to be carried alone. So the next time something hurts and you reach for that little white pill, take it. It's a miracle that you can, but know that you are holding the very end of a story that began hundreds of thousands of years ago, in caves and forests, with willow bark and frozen fungus and hands that drilled into bone, and with people who looked at someone broken and chose, again and again, to carry them. The pill is new, the pain is ancient, and for almost all of human history, the cure was never just a chemical. It was the simple fact that someone stayed.